Hey, hey everyone. So welcome to our session today. So Matthew Dewar is joining us today. He is an employment lawyer, and I'm going to be asking him a few questions about his journey into the legal field, as well as some advice that he may provide us. So I would like to introduce myself first. So my name is Sasha. I'm a third-year English literature student from the University of Toronto with some career aspirations of becoming a lawyer. And I'm sure this session will be very beneficial to me and all the other pre-law students here as well. So without further ado, I would like Matthew to introduce himself.
Hello. Hi, Sasha. Nice to meet you. My name is Matthew. Everyone calls me Matt. My last name is Dewar, like the Scotch whiskey. And what else can I say? I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing. Well, I've officially been licensed since 2005. That's when I was called to the bar. And I, of course, articled before that. Then I was a summer student before that. And my father was a lawyer. And so I kind of clerked for him when I could to make a little bit of extra money and get a lot of exposure to the world of law. So that's kind of my background. And now I own my own firm at the end of the day, after a long journey, which I'm happy to talk about if you're interested. Now I'm running a firm myself, which is kind of nice.
Amazing. Thank you. So I'm gonna, ask some questions about, in the beginning of your career stages. In fact, like your experience at university. So I wanted to know, so what kind of program and courses did you study in your undergraduate program, and at which university?
Okay, well, I came out of left field on this one because I did my undergrad at the Berklee College of Music in Boston. And so it was very music based. It's general liberal arts, I suppose. There's histories and Englishes and philosophy and what have you, but it's pretty much 90% music. And so I came out of left field with that because I think, and then I think you said you're an English major, and so I think a lot of people that go into law are English or history or poli-sci and a lot of that usual. Or traditional, not maybe not usual, but traditional aspects. Because I came out of music, I think I stood out a little bit more because if you've got 10 people that are applying that have poli-sci degrees, and there's nothing wrong with a poli-sci degree, I hasten to add, and then somebody who has a music degree, you tend to catch their eye maybe a little more easily. What I've noted, so I don't know how many people would be watching this and how many people would be in a music degree, for instance, but there's other things. I mean, we often had, I remember my first year, it was a nice mix because, again, the vast majority were history and English poli-sci, philosophy type undergrads. The ones more often than you might think had different backgrounds like music or a lot of medical stuff or a lot of science. That came out of there because the theory, at least 100 years ago when I was going to law school, the object of the game was to try and get a nice diverse opinion and diverse experiences so that whatever discussions you might be having in school or in class or whatever course you were in wasn't all through the same lens of, say, English poli-sci history. And it was nice to get a different perspective because to be a successful lawyer, I think you have to try and see all around and all the different perspectives. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that was my background.
No, it's super helpful. I actually wanted to know what inspired you to go and, study English, or not English, sorry, music in your undergrad.
Oh, well, I've been a music guy my whole life. And so it made sense when somebody, I remember I was thinking about this the other day, because I was going the traditional route as everyone else too. Had applied to whatever the usual Ontario universities for English and history and all of that. And the guidance counselor said, "Have you ever heard of Berklee?" Because he knew I was a musician and I was playing. I was already, even in high school, I was playing in bars and pubs and making money. And I said I hadn't. And so he showed me the brochure, and I went, "That's where I want to go." And I did. And I made my living as a musician for a while. And I think, as I always joke, but I'm not really joking, I was in Munster, Germany on tour with a band. So we were touring with a band, and it was, I don't know, night 10 billion. And I decided this is crazy. I got to do something of a little more substance, shall we say.
Mhm.
And it turns out I like to eat, right? So I figured I had to get a real job. So that
Mhm.
was really the catalyst for me to go. To be fair, though, my father is a sole practitioner down in London, Ontario. And so I grew up with stories about the law. And of course, I was working with him in between, tours or whatever to make a
Mhm.
couple of dollars. So it was a logical choice for me for sure. But music is still my love. I still play. Come down to the Fortunate Fox on Friday. This Friday, I'll be playing. So I know
Very
as a
cool.
university student, you know exactly where that is. So there you go.
Amazing. Thank you. What time
9 o'clock.
over there?
Nine
9
o'clock.
o'clock.
Nine till usually close. It says 9 till 1, but there's several waves that come in, so inevitably I end up playing till about 1:45 to 2 in the morning. So I'll be there.
You know what? I'm gonna make note of that right here.
Do it. Do it.
9 p.m.
9 p.m. at the Fortunate Fox.
Amazing. And you know what? I'm really curious, like, how was the application process like to go to Berkeley? Because it's a huge university, it's well known. Was it like super hard to get in?
Uh, well, in those days, I mean, I don't know. I had to. I mean, I had studied music. I had done piano lessons like a lot of people have, and I picked up guitar and bass by myself, and then did clarinet in public school and high school and all that. And so I had a good music background. So when I applied, of course, I had music teachers writing me nice letters, and I had to do an audition tape. I had to do some solo stuff and do some group stuff, and kind of demonstrate that you knew what you were doing and they weren't just letting anybody in.
Mhm.
And for some reason, probably because I was in Canada, they didn't require me to go down to Boston to do it in person. But of course, once you land there, you're in. Then you're thrown into an entirely different edition type purpose, and high pressure and good for courtroom stuff because I'm used to
Mhm.
performing for sure. So
Hmm. That's very true. I didn't think about that.
yeah.
Um, and I wanted to ask because I saw online just when I was researching a little bit about you, besides what Pre-Law Shatterers was providing us information, that it is an 80s inspired band that you're in.
Yeah, that was, well, I'm in a million bands. When I'm at the Fox, I'm by myself. So I've got a loop pedal and a bunch of things. And so I might beatbox or bang the guitar to get something going, playing along with it. But yeah, I've done, when I was touring Europe, it was a sort of a Celtic rock band. And
Mm,
I've toured everywhere with this 80s band. Yeah, it was a two-piece 80s band. And yeah, we played the Viper Room down in LA.
mm.
And we're flown to Hawaii and San Francisco to do weddings. I met Steve Jobs doing this.
Really? Wow.
Gloria Steinem was the officiant at this wedding we did in Hawaii. Like it's surreal where music can take you. So, but on
Wow.
Friday it'll be just me. It'll be just me. But you can check us out, the B.A. Baracus Band, on Spotify and Apple. And so it's just goofy 80s stuff, but it's fun. It's fun.
That's really cool. Wow. That's amazing. Um, and what inspired you to kind of go into law school? Because, I know that your father was a lawyer before. Did he inspire you, or was it something else that inspired you?
Yeah, I mean the cynical, joking answer is hunger, right? Hunger and a roof
Yeah.
inspired me. But if I'm honest, yeah, I guaranteed my father. He's one of the, as I say, he's one of the last Atticus Finches around. I grew up, much to my mother's consternation, of instead of clients paying my father money, it would be backing bushels of apples. So he'd help a farmer out, and the farmer didn't have any
Mm,
cash, so we get paid in apples, or we'd get paid in kind, if you will. And my dad was fine with that. My mother not as much. But the idea was, as my father always said, law is the great equalizer. And it sounds sort of
mhm,
corny and trite, but it's true because he loves, and to this day, I mean, he's 70, he'll be 79 this December, and he's still practicing. He still gets up and goes downtown London and works, but he loves sticking it to banks and to insurance companies, because they need, I mean, as both of us have concluded many years ago, banks and insurance companies are not your friends. And so he's got a lot of endless tales of Some, some little old lady whose deadbeat son got her to co-sign something, you know what I mean? And then,
Mhm.
and then he disappears, and
Mhm.
and the bank is coming down hard, and my dad somehow would always be able to finagle her out of that and stick it to the bank and get the bank to pay fees as well, and what have
Mhm.
you. And so, it's corny, but there's still, kind of hope in hope in the world. And I'm old fashioned as a result. I like doing, I do both sides in employment. I
Mhm.
do employer side and I do employee side. And it's nice. Not all employees are innocent, and not all employers are evil corporations.
Mhm.
And it's really nice to be able to go in there as honestly and as open-hearted, if you will, from a legal point of view, to be able to weigh the situation and try and do what's right, not to stick it to anybody, but to do what's right,
Mhm.
unless somebody's getting stuck. Do you know what I mean? If the employer
Mhm.
is being an idiot and throws somebody out on the street for nothing,
Mhm.
and that they deserve to be treated as such. But again, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but not every employee is innocent, and not every employer is a big mean corporation looking to hurt employees. So
Mhm.
anyway, there you go.
Thank you.
No problem.
I have a bunch of questions in my head, but I got to go by order just so everybody kind of knows every key detail about you. So I wanted to ask, although it was quite a while ago when you might have taken the LSAT and your law
Mhm,
school admission process. So I
mhm.
just wanted to know, your personal experience, like how the LSAT process was like for you, because regardless, even if it was a while ago, it still matters because people
Sure,
today are still kind of like stressed out about studying. What
sure.
are some tips that you can give for the law school admission process and the LSAT?
Well, from the LSAT thing, yeah, now that's a really 100 years ago. What I took one of those crash courses, if you will, over the weekend. I think it was through. I was living in London at the time, so it was through Western. I think, but they called it Charlie Brown University or something. I'm
Mm,
not sure what it was, but so you showed up on a Friday morning and a Saturday morning and a Sunday morning, and you learned the tips and the tricks and what have you to do it. It was invaluable. I'll tell you that I can't remember what it cost me, but whatever it cost me, it was invaluable, because you learn very quickly that to go in blind would be foolhardy. Number one, number two, even if you're particularly smart and buy the books, you buy the books from Indigo and crack it. It's hard to beat the it wasn't a one-on-one, but there was maybe 15 people in the class, and one teacher who had done a very smart practicing lawyer. And so you get different insights on it. And then everything from knowing that you can't possibly answer all the questions, that the dirty secret is that if you guess at 100% of them, you'll do better actually than if you just try and analyze every single one. This is the way it was, by the way, whatever, 25 years ago or whenever I did it. Might be different now, but I don't think so. And it's about picking the best pile of garbage out of a big pile
mhm,
of garbage. You got to pick the best answer. And a lot of it, I remember my dad, again, I'm going to reference him a lot, I think, but
mhm,
he didn't have the LSAT didn't exist when he went to law school. And you had to write a letter to the law school saying who you were and why you wanted to practice law and why you thought you might make a difference. That's how you got into law school back in those days. It's changed, obviously. And so with the LSAT, I remember him looking at it going, what the, like, he goes, I know senior judges that wouldn't get the answer to this. Like, what does this prove?
mhm,
And that's the other thing, is that it doesn't prove much, other than it's maybe a way that some people are a little more logical than others. Um, but I'm not sure what else it does. So I think but you need to like it or love it. You have to, the higher your mark, the more, in theory, attractive you're going to be to a particular law school. So
mhm,
that's the first part. So why not do everything you can to get the highest mark you can? And how you do that, learn as many tips and tricks, take a course if you can, and then practice. I mean, the other thing was, I remember I had a timer, and it was because you had to learn how to allocate maximum this amount of time on this question. And at the end, once you saw your time coming up, it's like, I'm just going to have to guess, boom, 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 because I've got to move on to the next, and kind of do it. And so that's what I would do. And then when you actually apply, to law school. Not to put undue pressure on everybody, on everybody out there who's going to be doing it, but
Mhm.
you want to try and get it right the first time, because if
Mhm.
you show up, if you blow it on the first time, it doesn't mean it's over at all,
Mhm.
but it's just not looked at, again, rightly or wrongly. If you show up with a second score, they might average it on you, they might not, who knows what they're thinking. But again, not to freak anyone out, because that's not necessarily the end of the story, because the story, just in like law, is everything. And if you've got a good story,
Mhm.
I knew people who, like, I went to law school, I went to Queens, and I knew people who blew it. They blew it. And yet they got in because they had a compelling story, and the school felt that there was something there that they could contribute to to the
Mhm.
overall, not only to the school, but perhaps to the practice of law in general.
Mhm.
But why, as I would say to clients, why put hurdles in front of yourself if you can get rid of them at the outset?
Mhm.
So study hard, take your tips, take your tricks, take a course, practice, practice, practice. And if you get, it's just one less thing for you to get, even if you do have a compelling story. The more you've got, the better, because it's brutal now, right? Isn't it? I mean, people trying to get in, and the competition is, even when I got in, they only accepted, I can't remember, the class was, it was ridiculous. Like it's
Mhm.
small. And when you realize how many people are applying to everywhere, and then when it gets whittled down, and it's it can be overwhelming, but keep at it, I guess. Keep at it,
It
for
is
sure.
really difficult. Yeah, no, and it is still extremely competitive as well.
Yeah,
Even if you were to apply, let's say if you can't get in here in Canada, then people they go all the way to the UK and then they study there. But then that's
yeah,
like the whole other process because some let's say courses in the UK they don't have courses that they do here in
that's right.
Canada. So
That's
then it's
right.
like more extended. So like as you said yourself, you have to be like also just very passionate too about it and you have to
Yeah,
really persevere and have a good story as well. I in fact heard the other day that in June 2023 they may remove the logic component on the
really,
LSAT.
really.
Yeah, because I think they found out they're doing some experimental thing with the students.
What could go wrong? What could possibly go wrong?
The way it could go wrong. And apparently it's more easier to kind of study the logic component and then go back to it on your second try compared to the other sections. So they're trying to see so it's getting more difficult,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then I think in 2025, see, this is all hearsay, right? Because
Sure. Spoken
um
like a lawyer. Listen to you, huh?
so I mean, but they said in 2025 they may not have the LSAT be a mandatory thing. It's part of the admission
Why
process.
would anyone do it voluntarily? I mean,
Yeah, I know. I'm looking at the books and I'm like, well, I just spent like $200 on these books, but anyway,
yeah.
um,
Well, I don't. That's interesting. I hadn't heard that. None of it surprises me, I suppose, because
yeah.
um, I've noticed. I mean, I think there's a real shift in what law schools deem important, and
Hmm.
in terms, and what makes a good quote unquote lawyer.
Hmm.
And they're shying away from people that maybe bring nothing to the table other than straight A's
Hmm.
across the board, because, well, that's great, but as I joke, and I don't, maybe I'm getting ahead of where your questions are, but like, people say, well, what do you do? And I say, well, I think I'm probably about a 75% psychologist, you know, 20% administrator, and what does that leave? A 5% lawyer, on
Mm.
a day-to-day basis. And I think that there are other skills, and I think much more important skills than just being super brilliant and scoring in the 100th percentile on the LSAT. I think there's
Hmm.
much better skills. And again, the advice to getting in to law school, for me, passing it on, would be, again, is understand that if it's competitive, and B, you look around, and as smart as you think you are, there's always somebody smarter. but what do you bring to the table that's different? And how can you express that in a way that is going to make a law school interested in you, right?
Mhm.
Like, well, yeah, okay, I've got a degree in this, and yeah, I did really great in the LSATs, but you know, for me anyway, again, I guess the easiest one is just for me. And they say, but well, holy smokes, this guy did music, and then he toured the world, with a band, and put out CDs, and he plays all the time, and he taught music, and
Mhm.
he volunteer. Everyone wants to volunteer stuff, and there's nothing wrong with it, but everybody does it, so you have to be careful, right? I mean, you want to be able to stand out. Not to say I'm not saying don't volunteer. Always volunteer. It's good to do that, but
Mhm.
and so my story, I think, was that I could relate to people, perhaps. And I also had a career. There was also a little bit of a gap. I didn't go straight out of undergrad.
Mhm.
Right? I graduated, and then I made my living for a while as a musician before I went. So I also could draw on real life, as real life is touring around is. You
Mhm.
can draw on that and sort of say, listen, I've seen the world. I know what it's like. I've seen, I've got my father's years of experience that I can draw upon, and what I grew up listening to, and that clearly appealed to them in
Mhm.
such a way. So anyway, there's a very circular way of getting back to the LSAT to say that, again, it's important, and if it's mandatory, you got to do it. If it's not, why would you do it unless they somehow subconsciously weigh a certain aspect of that as well. But if you do well, amazing, but paint a good story as to
Mhm.
who you are and why you want to do it and what you can bring to the profession as well as that particular law school.
And did you do like any volunteer things while in your undergrad besides, doing music? Did you do something specifically like community related that may also tie in with music, but then within the legal field in some sort of way, giving back?
Yeah. Well, yeah, giving back. I mean, I worked while I was in undergrad, specifically in Boston. I mean, I worked for an events coordinator under the table, um, and so we did. He was the premier, still is probably the premier events coordinator in Boston. So we did massive events, and I got to see. It's another story. I'll tell you at the Fox some of the stories. But in addition to doing these high-paying, high-profile type things, we would often do charity work and
Mhm.
for organizations that needed to raise their profile and whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
And then on a personal note or on a band note, I can't tell you how many fundraisers or charities or whatever or a band that I was playing and played for the same thing. I mean, raising, the usual raising awareness or what have you. So, um, I do. I mean, I still do it all the time, really, in one way or another. People say, "Hey, can you come and do this?" Or "Can you sit in and just play?" And I'm like, "Yeah, whatever. Buy me a couple of beers, I'll play. I don't care." Kind of.
Mhm.
And it's good. It feels good. But if it helps, and if you can raise a couple $100 or a couple $1,000 or whatever the case may be, no charity's going to say no to that. That's for sure.
Mhm.
Right?
Thank you.
No
Thank you
problem.
for providing that. He's a rock star and a lawyer.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Let's see. So I think we already talked about this before that you graduated from Queens for
Yeah.
law.
Mhm.
What kind of extracurriculars did you enjoy doing most during, law school at Queens? What kind of personal experiences did you get from Queens Law School that, really propelled you to say, hey, you know what, I really love this as well? Besides, touring and having advice from your father, did something at Queens happen for you to be like, yeah, I really want to do it?
That's a good question. I think Okay, think about this answer. I think that speaking about Queens specifically, and in fact, that's the only law school I can truly
Mhm.
talk about. But I was really lucky, really blessed to have a good year, and then by
Mhm.
that I mean the people that all got in at the same time. And then I don't know how detailed you guys know about law school, but typically you have in your first year, you've got a small section, right? So it's a
Mhm.
group of, there's 25 of you that go to all the classes together, but then you mix. It's like Hogwarts, right?
Mhm.
Right, right.
Mhm.
So there's Gryffindors, but then Gryffindors take certain. Because
Mhm.
I'm reading Harry Potter for the third time to my kids. So I'm very attuned to this. Anyway,
Mhm.
and so not only was my small section very human, and they weren't all. I'm sure we're going to talk about this, but they weren't Bay Street obsessed. Oh, I got to get to Bay Street. Oh, I got to make the big bucks. I got to wear the suspenders and
Mhm.
do all of this. It was much more again, it sounds corny, but it's true. A sort of a caring, nurturing environment. So there was some competition, but it was more friendly than anything.
Mhm.
And there's always, there's always a bit of competition.
Mm.
That remember I was telling you about the course I took, the LSAT course I took.
Mhm.
The teacher left us with this advice, and I'll give the cleanest version I can. He says, "Listen, the best advice I can give to you guys when you get to law school is if by the second week you don't know who the class a-hole is, it's probably you." And it's sound advice, because it doesn't matter what class you're taking right now, Sasha. It doesn't matter if it's English and
Mhm.
English 101, 102, or 201,
Mhm.
whatever.
Mhm.
You can know that's the same the characters pop up, and you never got away with it. It was the same when you were in grade 6, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And it's no different in law school, and it's no different in a law firm, I can tell you. But I was so with all of that in mind, and I was very keenly aware of that. When I had a particularly good group, it gave me at least hope that not every lawyer is this money hungry, um, screw everybody. I just want to make a buck, and if I can do it on Bay Street, all the better, kind of thing. They're out there. Don't get me wrong, but knowing that smart people who had good intentions, and it's okay to make money. There's nothing wrong with making money. Um, but they're not all necessarily the stereotypical lawyer is enough to say, okay, I think I probably have made the right choice. And knowing the power, of course, when you're reading this stuff, now the people complain about the law, but they've
Mhm.
got no idea that without it, we've got nothing. Everything is based on the law. I always used to say everyone should have to take first year law.
Mhm.
Everyone, doesn't matter who you are. You should, if
Mm.
you want to be a doctor, I don't care. You have to take a first year law school, because you learn basics of everything: contracts, torts, criminal,
Mhm.
um, constitutional, and public law. Am I missing anything? I don't know. It forms the basis anyway of sort of that. And of course, then I cynically say, but if we did that, we'd all be out of work. All the lawyers would be out of work because people
Mhm.
are more cautious. But anyway, I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, no, it does. It's super helpful. And that piece of advice too that you got as well.
yeah,
Um,
I remember that. Sorry for using that phrase. I could have said the real.
no, no, that's fine. Let's see here. So here, why don't I ask you just more of a practical question? So what is a typical day in your career like in terms of responsibilities and tasks?
Mm, good question. And I'll start with the idea. I was thinking about this the other day, coincidentally,
Mm.
that because I, as a musician guy, and my personality and all that, organization was never my strong suit.
Mm.
But it dawned on me the other day that I've kind of turned into a bit of an organized person, at least when it comes to work, because it's all very grown up. And I know this sounds ridiculous, but I think all the time, I stand back and I sort of go, holy smokes, like, I'm a lawyer and people pay me a lot of money, and a lot of big corporations pay me money to give them advice on things. So but I'm also running a firm. I helped start this firm, and I got the people to come with me, and I take care of all of the stuff in the background. Um, and so there's other people counting on me to make sure that they get paid and stuff. And so there's not everybody. That's not for everybody. I kind of like it, but that's not for everybody. Some people are much
Mhm.
happier to say, look, I don't want to deal with if the photocopier is broken, and I don't want to deal with HR issues, and I don't deal with payroll, and I don't want to deal with
Mhm.
rent. internet's down and all that stuff. And I don't love it, but it's nice to be in control. I think I'm getting there. I think I'm working my way there. So all of that is to say, so a typical day for me is, of course, looking. Usually the night before I look at what's going on, what's coming up, what's going on. I have a trial coming up sometime next week. Welcome to the court system. They don't tell you. You think I'd get a hard date like Wednesday? No, it's sometime during the week of November 28th through to December 2nd. So I've got to balance all of that, knowing that the big thing is there, and what do I have to do to prep it versus all of the day-to-day stuff that comes in because your phone rings all the time, right? Somebody says, because I'm an employment lawyer, so it's a human-based thing. So stuff happens all the time that you never expected. So you're doing that as well as ongoing projects. So for instance, I owe a client 2 contracts, an independent contractor and another employer template. So I've got to deal with all of that, and you have to learn a responsibility to kind of triage it all the way down. You have to learn how to prioritize. You have to learn how to say no, or not necessarily no, but not right now. I know you think it's the most important thing in the world, and it is very important. And you know what? I didn't log off last night till about 11:30, but 11:45, because yesterday I was prepping for the trial because I didn't know when the trial was going to happen. And meanwhile, the emails start to come in, and I've got the added, well, every lawyer should know this, but you've got the added pressure of saying, look, if you don't service that client, somebody else will. And if somebody else does it, you're not getting paid. And that means, and all the consequences. It's owning your own firm and running it has focused my mind more in the last 3 years than the previous 15 years that I was working at firms. But even when I was working at firms, you still have to prioritize. And because you got partners giving you work, and they think it's the most important thing, but you're busy trying to build a book of business for yourself, and you want to make service is the most important thing, good service. Plus you've got the day-to-days and stuff. So all of that swirls around to say that I don't necessarily have a typical day, but often you'd almost think I was a lawyer, though, how much I'm talking. Hey, Sasha, I'm sorry.
No.
You ask me a question and I just start talking.
No.
Ask anyone around here, they'll tell you. Anyway, so today I knew that we were doing this, and I knew that I've got to get back to the court on some of the technical aspects for next week. And I've got a bunch of little things, it's just the little things often that will eat up your day. Like so-and-so read said, we still haven't been paid. Where are the legal fees? And so then I got to follow back up with the client saying, I thought you said you sent that. What's going, not as, it's certainly not like Suits, and it's not like, and I'm sure you probably knew that, but it's not like Suits. You have to, I go back to my, 75-25 ratio kind of thing. I get to be a lawyer prepping for this trial. I get to be a pure lawyer at trial, and you're there, and it's real. I mean, it's as real as you can get. You're staring at a judge who represents now the king, and because you're in court and you're making your pitch. And I've got, my client is a big international company, and I'm fighting off this typical lawyer stuff, and we've got a good case, and I'm pretty confident we're going to win. But it's a human on the bench, and you don't know. And so it's high pressure because you don't want to blow it, and you don't want to lose the client, and you don't want to embarrass yourself and all that. And so that's my day, probably whenever we're done this. No hurry. I've got lots of time, but I got to turn my mind to that, and then go back to finish those contracts and just, whatever. So it's nice. Again, being an employment lawyer, and it's probably like this as a criminal lawyer, certainly as a family lawyer. You're dealing with humans, and so that's a bug and a feature, I suppose. It's a bug because they're humans, and you just don't know. You've got everything, you got to deal with that. But it's cool because it keeps it interesting. And just when you thought you heard it all, you go, I'm sorry, what? One of my partners, point next door, he's not here, he's next door, talking about he's got some crazy client who's convinced that somebody else has kidnapped her cat. And so you've got to deal with that and try and get a result. It's kind of crazy. So anyway, that's what makes it fun, though, and interesting. And not to slag securities lawyers and corporate lawyers, my wife did financial transactions for years
Mhm.
as a lawyer. To me, that's dreadful because you're dealing with, it's just a lot of paper and you do nothing, and then you do everything for 48, 72 hours straight, and then you crash again and you do nothing. And all it is you're fighting over shall versus must versus may.
Mhm.
One word and that's it. Or the banks say we're not doing it. You know, this is the deal. If you don't like it, don't take it. We don't. So, and then you're organizing things, and some people love it. I don't, but that's the, I guess the beauty of going to law school as well, is that you can get a nice variety. For me, I like the human aspect of it. So there you go.
I actually just realized that I never asked you to specify what employment law is. And I
Mm,
did want to ask you, what does employment law look like for you? Because there is the definition of it, but then you are working in employment law. So I'm just wanting for you to explain a little bit more about that. And can you, although it is for privacy reasons as well, if you can maybe talk about one of your favorite cases
okay.
that you had. So yeah.
Okay, well, so I specifically call myself an employment lawyer versus a labor lawyer, because the
Hmm.
difference in the biz typically is that labor is organized, unionized type stuff. So in that realm, and I call it a realm because it's so different than law as we know it. I mean, it's still the law,
Hmm.
but you've got to pick a side, and you have to stick to that side forever. As a labor lawyer, you can't be union on one and employee on the other, or sorry, employer on the other.
Hmm.
Um, so there's that, and then the Ontario Labor Relations Board. I do this because they're right there. It's funny when I'm pointing; it's wherever they are in my world, but they're right there. They run a very tight ship, and you're dealing. It's high. What in my, and I'm exaggerating, but up is down, and down is up, and a lot of the normal rules that you might live and die that you would learn in civil procedure in second or third year don't apply. Like, it's very strange. So,
Yes.
and you can get into very minute, like construction union labor is way different than general labor versus whatever. Anyway, I don't really do that. I do
Hmm.
employment law, which is there's more work in it, that's for sure. And it's the day-to-day relationship between an employer and employee and everything that
Hmm.
flows from that. So you've got the beginning of the relationship, recruiting and hiring and contracts, expectations, salary, and all of that stuff, to management of that relationship, from do I get a bonus, do I not get a bonus, am I what did I do, Sally is being mean to me, management stuff, to the end of the relationship.
Hmm.
You want to just fire them or they quit, and follow up from that. And then you've got the civil litigation part, where you've got employment law, or wrong, I should say, like wrongful dismissal.
Hmm.
But that also encompasses human rights, um,
Hmm.
and all of that encompasses occupational health and safety.
Hmm.
It encompasses the provincial versus the federal. So most businesses are provincially regulated, and so you've got a certain statute, whereas somebody like Rogers or Bell or TELUS or the banks are all federally regulated. So they're subject to
Hmm.
the Canada Labor Code,
Hmm.
which is a little funnily named because part of it is unionized stuff, but it's also labor in the terms of a general thing. Anyway,
Hmm.
it's quite a broad spectrum, and I, again, because I do both sides, it's very interesting because I get to learn. Well, again, to go back to the psychologist part, you learn how people think, you learn what's important, what's not, pressure points, how to problem solve. I think that's probably on my bio somewhere about being a problem solver, because ultimately that's what it is. I mean, nobody, clients don't come to me and say, you know what, I got a whack of money that I would love nothing more than to give you, and spend a
Hmm.
lot of time and stress and energy nobody, right? Everyone says, I got a problem. And it doesn't matter what side you're on. I've got a problem. Can you help me solve it as quickly as you can, as efficiently as you can, or cheaply if you'd like? Which brings me, I guess that's a segue to when you're saying these sort of the cases I've done.
Hmm.
The only, just trying to think, well, that's not more often than not, because I've been to regular court, Superior Court of Justice in Ontario. I've been to the Small Claims Court. I've been to the Human Rights Tribunal. I've been to the Ontario Labour Relations Board. I've been to the Federal Court of Appeal. I've been to the Canadian Human Rights and Canada Labour Code programs, Canada program, all that. So that's big, 7, I guess,
Mhm.
venues. And the vast majority of them, like probably 98% of it, has been on defense, because in my motto anyway is that, I mean, a good lawyer keeps their clients out of court, right? You don't want to be, a lot of people, oh, I've been to court more than anyone else in the world. Well, does that make you a good lawyer? I'm not so sure. That just makes you a non-problem solver. That makes you a problem creator. And
Mm.
who are you doing it for? You're doing it for yourself so that you can generate money and settle scores. Remind me to
Mm.
just that phrase. I want to come back to settling scores in a second. Anywho, most of it has been on the defense because we've had no choice but to get dragged along for the ride, if you will. They're being ridiculous. They being the plaintiff they're just being, there's no one to talk to. They want $1 billion and a McDonald's lunch, and you're like, what? No, like, no, we don't want to. We're not giving you this. And that's what's going on next week. I've got this slam dunk. I shouldn't say this, right? Knock on wood, but we've got the law on our side. But this particular law firm, they'll take anything. Doesn't matter. The merits matter not at all. They'll take everything and they'll fight it with the idea that most people, right, justice doesn't come into it. It's an economic business decision where they roll their eyes and say, how much am I going to have to pay you to fight this? How many days of trial do you think it's going to be? What are our chances of winning? Blah, 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 blah. And they go and they plug their nose and and so this particular law firm that I'm going up against has made a career out of it, and they've made a lot of money. They've got no respect, but they've made a lot of money. And so, but my client is saying, no, we'd rather, yes, we know it's going to cost more. We know they could get rid of this probably for about 15 grand, which is in their thing, peanuts. But it doesn't matter because this one's a principal thing. They're sick and tired of this particular firm taking stupid cases like this. Human rights, the same thing. Like if there's no one to talk to on the other side, if they want their day, they're convinced of the justness of their mission, and the only thing that'll shut them up is $1 million. Why you might as well go to trial. You've got no choice, right? And so I typically will fight those fights if I know I've got a winner. And if I've got a loser, I encourage my clients to settle, to say, this is not good. We've got to, if the odds are 50-50, do you want to pay the money it's going to take to get us there to then maybe even lose on a 50-50 shot? And I really will lean on people to throw some money at the problem if it's a smarter move. So my favorite thing ever, I mean, yeah, that's a good question. I've won pretty much, I'm going to curse myself for next week, I know this, but I think I've won pretty much all of them except one small claims court thing where you just never know, like small claims court, it's avoid it if you can. And we were prepared to offer, say, 6 months, and the judge hit us with 9, so it was only an extra 3 months anyway. But everything else that I've gone to, so I've won, so I'm happy about that. I'm not bragging. It's a fact, and so I'm very satisfied. So they're all my favorite in that sense, because you're like, yeah, that's really cool. But there's a bit of it's bittersweet, for lack of a better phrase, because when it's all said and done, you feel like grabbing the plaintiff and say, why did you do this? I warned you not to do this. And now look at you. You've spent, the human rights I did a trial last year and I won. And the guy, again, it was a suicide mission. I don't know why the lawyer was just not listening, and we won. And so not only was it dismissed, but the plaintiff, who was making about I don't know. Well, he walked away from his job. So he was making $0 technically, had to pay $40,000 to us for legal costs. And he's, you should have walked away. Why did you do this? You know, kind of, you feel like grabbing them and doing that. And like human rights, because you can't get, the system's even more backed up now. But I think I've done 4 trials there at the human rights, maybe 5. And like all of them are stretch out over, like I did one that was 10 days long, stretched over about 3 years.
Mm.
Right? Because you get 2 days and then nothing, and then everything goes dormant. And then we've got another 3 days for you. Great. And then you have to relearn everything. And we won, and you can't even get costs at the Human Rights Tribunal. So now, to be fair, the applicant or the plaintiff had to pay his lawyer, and it was a hugely stupid move on his part. So I feel a little bad for them, right? Because you know, but you know, now I could be a tough lawyer and say, well, I won, so there you go, look at me. But you can look it up. Go to Canley. You can look up decisions you want, right? You can type in my name, you'll see what I've done. So
Probably I will end up like just typing your name in.
yeah, it'll say like, stay away from this guy, he's crazy.
You know what? Although I do want to ask you about your experience with your firm, you know, I am actually very curious as to how you kind of balance, let's say, you know, your personal life, let's say time with your family, let's say more of the aspect on like valuing your own time, self-care with, you know, your job, you know, because it is quite a lot. So how do you sort of balance that, if at all?
Yeah.
So
That was that's good. You were asking a leading question, and then you saved it with if at all. So that was, I think that before I started this firm, and when I was working for other people, I made a concerted effort. I should back up a little bit and say that there's working for yourself is not for everybody, but sometimes if you are that kind of person, it's the only thing. And for a guy that lives on giving advice to other people, I really didn't follow my own for years. That is working for other people, because I really resented sitting at the kitchen table you know, the kids. I got home and I got enough time to read them 5 pages of Harry Potter, and then I got to get on the kitchen table and work. And I did that last night. But the difference is that when I was working for somebody else, I resented every minute of it, because I thought, why am I making them money? Why? I don't even like them. And so that tended to mutate into me specifically making more time for myself and or my family, whatever, personal life, because I didn't care. Right? I serviced the client. I did with the client. I would never throw the thing, but I didn't care for making money for other people. And that's what everyone has to learn. I mean, you guys are way not even close to figuring that stuff out. Yeah, you got to get into law school and do law school, and there's somewhere an article and do all that and write the bar ads and all that stuff. So you're not nowhere close, but you'll get there. And when you do, I mean, usually the only option you have is to work for somebody for the first few years, because you don't know anything and you've got to try and build up a client base and stuff. But it's perfectly fine for people to do that for the rest of their lives, because some people don't want the responsibility and there's great responsibility. You got to meet payroll. Again, I'm you know, we've got an assistant, and I got an associate, and I got rent and internet and blah blah blah, and it goes on and on and on. And they don't care. They need to get paid, and they don't, you know. And so that's just not for everybody. So if you're not that kind of person that wants to drop what they're doing to close payroll or to speak with payroll, there's nothing wrong with that. But you understand that it creates a tension, because you want a personal life, and you should get a personal life. And socially or society wise, we're drifting that way anyway. I think more and more firms are realizing that people just aren't putting up with this crap anymore. And so you have to carve out the time, and you do it. And as long as you do a good job, that's fine. But you may not make whatever the dream is, a partner. if that's the dream, although that seems to be falling away for a lot of people too. So when it came to me opening my own place, I don't, if it sounds like I'm complaining, I'm not. I quite enjoy what I do, and taking care of things and keeping the plate spinning. And to go back to the kitchen table, I know that when I got the kids to bed and I opened up the computer, I know that whatever I'm doing, I'm earning for them, right? I actually do have a boss, even though I'm my own boss. It's the kids, right? They're my boss, and they keep growing. Three boys. So I don't resent it, and because I've set up the firm the way I have, I can steal the moments when I need to keep the ball rolling down the field, without sacrificing family time. So again, I just got, like last week, I was at Great Wolf Lodge with everybody, but the wife and kids, we Sunday to Wednesday, and I had my laptop, so it was no big deal. The kids go to bed and I sneak in and a little bit, but it's not taking me away from them when you need it. So you make the time that you have to make. And all of that is to say, again, that by the time you guys are at the like first year, second year, third year, first years, you're going to have to work hard because you have to learn too. That's the other thing. I know I'm jumping around a bit, but you don't, just because you graduate law school, you know nothing. I'm telling you, nothing, because all of the cases that you read in law school have already been decided. They're easy. They form the principles and stuff that for today's problems, first year or 10th year or 100th year, to come in and you have to sort of apply those principles to a unique situation, that because it wouldn't be a situation if it was the same as the case that you read in law school, because it's already been settled. So you have to learn, and there's the only way to do it is to put in the hours, right? You have to learn how to write a letter. You might think, well, I'm in English. I'm an Englishman. I can write a letter, no problem. No doubt you can, but you also have to realize, you have to think about it and say, what am I saying? Is it going to be held against me? You have to write everything as if a judge may read it someday, because a judge may read it someday. You have to understand that you're dealing with another human on the other side. They may be a lunatic, they may be reasonable. You have to understand that you're writing for the client. Like I'm telling the lawyer, most of my stuff is I write one letter. One letter is all I ever do when I'm on for the employee. It's a demand letter. And if the employer writes back and says, get lost, then it's an email, and you got time for a chat. And then I pick up the phone and I do this talk. And so most of my problems get solved that way. But you have to know how to do that. And that comes with years of experience. But you also have to know the law. So if you're writing that letter and you're citing the wrong principles, or the stupid case, or something that's been, overturned or whatever. But there's only one way to do that. And the same problems. And as an employment lawyer, I'm always learning a new story, but I've seen the movie already often, because I've been doing it long enough. All of that is, again, a long-winded way of saying that you got to put in the hours in years 1, and then in years 2 and years 3. By the time you get to the 3rd or 4th year, if you're at a firm, you can maybe start delegating a little bit, and you've seen more problems. You're more comfortable drafting a statement of claim. You're more comfortable picking up the phone. I remember, I would write a draft or man letter, and whoever my principal was would say, hey, that's great. Why don't you just end? I would invite you or your counsel to contact us at your convenience. I was like, well, I don't want to do that. I want to talk to a lawyer. I can't do this, and because it's scary. You're dealing with real, but once you realize it and stuff, so put in the hours at the beginning. The longer you do it, the easier it gets. You're still always doubting yourself. If you're not, then you should be. But you make time. So you make time for your family. How's that? That's kind of a ridiculous answer, but you know what I'm saying.
No, it's all truth. You're telling the truth there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to fit in one last question, because we started at 12:10. I can ask you just one last question.
You ask me what you want. It's fine.
All right. So
I'm already well prepared for this trial. I've got more work to do, but I'm feeling very prepared. So take your time. I don't care. It's fine.
Okay. Okay. I'm actually going to ask you a 2-in-1. So what are some traits that a person should have when wanting to pursue a career in employment law? And what advice would you give back to your younger self prior to attending law school?
Prior to attending law school. Okay, well, I think empathy is probably what you need as an employment lawyer, because going back to what I said a long time ago about employers versus employees, and not all employees are innocent, not all employers are big bad corporations. You have to understand that, from an employee's point of view, they think they're right, and you get ones that think that they've been mortally wronged, and until they get that letter of apology, that will never come. They won't rest, and you have to understand that that's the way they feel. But you have to be gentle and try and explain their way out of it. And you have to, when you're acting for employers, it depends. Like if you're acting for a big, huge monster Canadian company, money is often no object, but that doesn't mean that it's a blank check, and it doesn't mean that they're not also wounded on some sort of thing. You often hear the stories about, like, what more could we have done, Matt? What more could we have done? We they wanted this, we gave them this. Well, they wanted that, this, and this, and we bent over backwards. We've never done this before, and here they are, and now they've stormed out and they've lawyered up, and here we're like, what was going on? And it's 100-fold when it's not a coast to coast company, when it's a mom and pop shop, with 2 employees or 3 employees, and they're threatening, they come back in a lawsuit. A lawsuit for $100,000, if you're CIBC, is nothing, right? They probably get 1 billion of those a day, but $100,000 lawsuit for, from a small, I don't know, I can't think of anything, a small sub shop or something, a sandwich shop. That's it. They can turn your lights out, right? And so empathy is everything. You have to understand, and try and do that, and then be creative. The more creative problem solving you can come up with. My dad says, it's probably not his line, but it's a great line, which is to say, the mark of a good settlement is when both sides are equally unhappy. And, it's true. And you have to, the reality is that you gotta, it's just empathy, resolve, understand, acknowledge, do what you can, say, that's okay. I understand you're hurt, but this is the law, and the law doesn't care about how you feel. This is how it's going to be, and how are we going to, let's get you out of this mess, and, as quickly as possible, and hopefully as cheaply as possible. It's okay to make money, but litigation can be so prohibitively expensive. And I've already forgotten something about pre-law school, but I can't remember what the question was that you asked me. It was
just advice that you would give.
I would give myself in pre-law. Oh, the cynical answer: don't do it. Just kidding. It's a great. Every lawyer will say that, actually, in a sort of cynical, self-deprecating manner, to say, don't do it, kid, don't do it, save yourself. And I would probably say that if we were drinking at a bar or something like that. But the truth is, it depends what you're going into it for, right? If you're going into it, I think, remember I said settling scores, you didn't remind me about that, so I just reminded myself.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
We're totally fighting now, Sasha. That's it. We're totally fighting. You're out of the band.
Okay.
It depends why you're going to law school. And I don't want to sound soapboxy, and I don't want to sound corny, but I think you have to think long and hard about why you want to go and be a lawyer, because it's a lawyer, just having a law degree or being a lawyer is not a license to print money. It's simply not. There are some fabulously wealthy lawyers out there. The vast majority of them are making perhaps more than the average, right? The average person. But don't think that just because you graduate law school, and even if you get a job at McCarthy's or Osler or Norton, all the Seven Sisters, that doesn't mean that you're on easy street, to say nothing of the debt that you're going to have to service, for all that law school stuff. So if you're only getting into it for the money, that's okay, I suppose, but I don't know how fulfilled you're going to be. If you're getting into it for the status or the look at me thing, I think you're bound to be disappointed, because you realize how many people really don't like lawyers. If you're getting into it to help people, I think that's a great thing to do. I think that a lot of law schools want that. They pay more than just lip service to that. They're pushing what's known as public law a lot more, and so you will be fulfilled. You might not be rich, you know. And again, and one's not necessarily better than the other. I know lawyers that work very, very hard and are very satisfied with their careers, but they probably could be making more money getting commissions at Best Buy. You know what I mean? But that's okay. That's not a bad thing. I mean, it doesn't, because if you're not into it for the money, if you're into it for the satisfaction of knowing that you can stick it to banks and insurance companies, with all due respect to banks and insurance companies, then that's okay. So for me, I had to do, so what would I have told myself? I think I would have told myself that you probably would be wise to go out on your own way sooner than you did, because you'll save yourself a lot of headache and heartache, and you'll make more money too, which is a good thing. And I probably would have said that be prepared that you're going to be, you know, it's not all sunshine and roses. You know, there's times when I sort of go like, what, you know, what am I doing? This is ridiculous, and kind of thing. And it's frustrating. You get irritated because you think you're being stupid. Why can't you just see it my way? And, you know, and you get sort of frustrated and all that stuff. But, you know, overall, I think that I would have told myself, if you've got any doubts, don't have them, because you've got a lot to be grateful for. And I chose an interesting area. There's no end of work, by the way, just to give a pitch for employment law too. But there's no end of work. It's human, you know, like, you know, what I would say if I were, I say this all the time when I take, I do a lot of this sort of, I like doing this stuff, you know what I mean? Or if you know, if I'm going out, I'll say, okay, look, let's get a couple of drinks, meet me at the bar. Let's talk about what you want to do, blah, 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 blah. And what I often say is, look, cast your eyes around this bar, cast your eyes around Fortunate Fox is a bad one, because there's a lot of students there, but the average place down here downtown, everyone's either an employer or an employee, i.e. everyone is a potential client, and a potential client has potential money, and you're not doing it just for the money, but you need to get paid for what you do. So there's an endless supply of work. And so I think that I would have told myself, just to kind of go back and underscore, I think I would have told myself that you got to, Matt, I think you will enjoy helping people more than you think you will. And I think you should go out on your own sooner than you do, and understand that there'll be some frustrations, but on the whole, it's a wonderful profession that allows you to meet people, deal with people, help people, and get paid for it, and feel good about yourself all at the same time.
Okay.
Sorry, one more thing, because I skipped it myself. That would have been a perfect ending, but I'm going to wreck it and say, don't go into law school if you're looking to settle scores from high school. There are so many jackass lawyers out there that have never gotten over the idea that they weren't invited to the school dance. And so their idea here is that this is their revenge on society. I'm going to go to law school. I'm going to be the biggest jackass I can. I'm going to charge $1,000 an hour. I'm going to be obstructionist. I'm not going to care about the client. I'm going to care about making money and driving fancy cars and going to all the best restaurants. And what they always forget is they're still a dork, right? That just because they're doing it, they're still a loser, and they're still not invited to the dance. Nobody wants to be around them. Nobody, they dread it. And I won't say the names, but I'll tell you at the Fox exactly what I'm talking about. And they're roundly and soundly mocked in the bar. They think that the employment bar, not the drinking bar, they think that they're the best, and they're laughed at, and it's their worst nightmare. And so don't think that just because you go to law school and you're going to get revenge, some sort of revenge from high school, it's not going to work. It's just going to make it worse. So don't go to law school if you're looking to settle scores and be the cool. Suddenly you think it makes you the cool person. Go to law school if you've got a genuine interest in it, because it's not always easy. And if you've got an interest in helping people and trying to do something that there's something new every day. It's not the same. You're not just selling widgets every single day. Not that there's anything wrong with selling widgets, but I think you get my point.
Yes. So intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic for that sort.
There can be a little bit of extrinsic, but just don't fool yourself. You know,
Mm.
don't fool yourself, because you got to live with yourself, and you got to answer, and you got reputations and what have you. And I'm telling you, there's too many people that have done it for the wrong reasons, and they don't help anybody, not even themselves. They're fabulously wealthy, and they're miserable,
Mm.
miserable people, miserable. And so you're much better to, and it's not for everybody. I guess the other thing I would say is that, um, obviously this group that's gonna maybe watch this or not, they think they've got an interest in it, or maybe they've invested a lot of their emotions and psyche into the idea that if I gotta be a lawyer, I gotta get into law school because that's my key to fill in the blank. You're not all gonna get in, probably.
Mm.
That's the hard reality. There's only so many spots, and there's only so many things. There's only so many dollars to pay for tuition, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you don't get in, it's not the end of the world. It really is not. I mean, a lot of people I know didn't get into law school, and it was the best thing that ever happened to them. They were miserable at the time. They didn't know. They thought it was over. This is it. And they've gone on to be very successful and much happier, and are actually, thank the fates that they didn't get in, and that applies across the board. Even if you get into law school and you don't get the gig at Osler that you really wanted to, and that's all you really wanted. I always wanted to work at Osler, and they didn't get it, and they don't realize how lucky in a lot of ways that they are, because they probably had an opportunity. And I'm not slagging Osler in particular, it's just a lot of the bigger firms. You get in there and it's not suits. Again, I got to say that
Mhm.
it's not suits. And you work on a very discrete, and there's a file that's this big, and then you get to work on a tiny little discrete part of it like that. And you're doing it for 12 hours a day, and you're exhausted. And then the file disappears. You don't even know what happened to it, because you just did this little, and then it's on to the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next. And that's how you'll learn, I suppose. But again, that's not for everybody. And a lot of people that don't get in a smaller firm, now I'm making a pitch for us, but I don't mean to, but a smaller place like us, we encourage the idea that you got to learn the law and take your time. And here's a file that I'll help you with, but I
Mm.
want you to be, intricately involved, so that you know
Mm.
what's going on. In fact, I'm not going to do the examinations for discovery. You're going to do the examinations for discovery. Let's talk about what. And that's, we don't pay as much, obviously, as Osler, but a lot of these smaller firms, you'll get a bigger and better legal education in 1/10 of the time that these, and then ultimately you do make more money, because there's not as many mouths to feed. One more piece of advice that you didn't even ask, and I just thought about it.
Okay.
I said I just start talking.
Mm.
Let's pretend everyone's watching this gets into law school. That's wonderful. Let's pretend that everybody gets to the firm interviews where they want to get to McCarthy's or Osler or Macmillan or whatever, all of the big ones, or even the mid-sized ones. It doesn't matter. And you don't get the job. Everybody thinks, or most people think, well, I want to work in Toronto. That's where I want to do. This is, I want to work and live in Toronto, work down on Bay Street. And it doesn't happen. Again, there's only so many jobs. The competition of getting into law school is nothing like the competition. I mean, if you're fighting over 8 spots at Tories, you better be awesome, right?
Mhm.
And they're disappointed and heartbroken and all that. Well, number one, there's life beyond that. But number two, if you were interested in doing this thing, as long as living in Toronto is not number one on your list of whatever it is that your wants are, I would highly, highly, highly recommend. There are so many sole or 2 to 3 person firms in Ontario, all over Ontario, from Windsor up to I can't think of them more, like Sault Ste. Marie and everywhere in between. Dryden, that's even more north. That are at the age that they're looking to wind down, and if they don't have anyone to take over their practice, then the practice just folds, disappears, and all of the clients get dealt out to the law society, that will in turn find lawyers, say, Joe Blow retired, they're dead, whatever, here it is. But what they'd rather do is make a little money from the idea that they've built up a practice, and they would love nothing more than lawyers to come up and say, can you hire me? Help me help you. You teach me, I will article with you. I will do my first couple of years with you, and then we're going to do this. In a sense, you start to step back, and maybe you only now you're coming in 3 days a week because you wanted to retire anyway, but I'm still in 5 days a week. You're introducing me to the clients. It's a smooth transition, and maybe by year 5, that's 1 day a week, and then they're gone, or they leave, but you pay sort of trailing things. It may not sound appealing, but on the other hand, and I just know because I read the news. Do you think you're ever going to own a house here in Toronto, Sasha? All right, like I don't know. I hope you do, and maybe, but maybe that's not what you want. But real estate's insane in Toronto. And Toronto's got a lot going for it, but it's got a lot not going for it. And
Mm.
if you wanted to own a firm that and get the mentorship that you'd never get anywhere else, and live in a city where you could actually own a decent piece of property, it's not everybody's thing, but a decent piece of property, maybe have a family, good school, small town. Everyone turns their nose up, and oh my God, I couldn't live in Sault Ste. Marie. I know people there that are making great money all the time for family. It's cold, but whatever kind of thing. Kingston, London, Windsor, Sarnia. There's a million towns in Ontario, and it doesn't have to be Toronto. It doesn't have to be Tories. It doesn't have to be this Bay Street sort of dream that they try and sell you, because they'll try and sell you once you get into law school. Oh well, it's no longer the classroom 103. It's the Macmillan
Mhm.
room. It's the Macmillan room. It's the Tories room. And they're there. They're giving you. They're on campus interviews, and they come armed with emblazoned pens and shoe shining kits and whatever, with their names emblazoned all over it. And it's to dazzle you and to make you think that the be all and end all is to come and work at. I got to pick on another firm at Steichman's. you know, and it's not the be all and end all. And more the attrition rate of those people, the people that start. In fact, I started at Lang Missioner. That's where I summarized an article, and it doesn't exist. It merged with Macmillan. But I started there, and of my group, there was 8 of us, 7 or 8 of us. The only person who is still there is one. Her name is Nika Robinson, and she's now in Vancouver at the Macmillan Vancouver office. She's the only one that's still there. And of all of them that started there, there's only 3 of us that are still in practice, like private practice. The rest have either quit law or gone in-house somewhere.
Mm.
So the attrition, because it's so disillusioning when you get to, you think you've made it at I got to pick another one, at Blake's, and it's not. And so you could have saved yourself a lot of time, depending on what you want and what the ultimate goals are. But you'd be amazed at if you took over a firm in Chatham, and in 5 years, the legal education that you would have would far surpass anything that you would get at Tories. You would be owning your own practice. You would be making as much or more money than a lot of those people at Blake's, for instance, because you'd be amazed when you're not feeding, when you're not kicking the money upstairs, because that's what you're doing in the early days. But you actually get to keep it yourself. How much less work you have to do to make more money.
I wanted to ask you just very briefly. You did mention a little bit before that, those who were trying to get into law school, they didn't get into law school, but they became successful anyway. Can you maybe just detail what they're doing right now?
Sure. Well, so you've got some that have entirely changed. I mean, obviously they changed careers, but they entirely changed careers. I know one person who became a police officer and worked their way up, and now they're they're not in the administrative side. I think they're still on the streets kind of thing, but they're like a very, very high ranking. I've got somebody who's opened up their own business, like a baking types of cakes and specialty stuff, and they may or may not have been on the Great Canadian Baking Show, but I'll
so cool.
Who else can I think of? TV, a lot of like not on TV, but in behind the scenes producing, executive producing things and getting into that sort of stuff. So if you're all going to, how do I say this? You all have the brains, clearly. None of you are stupid to get as far as you have to even be considering law school. So if you've got the brains to get it that far, you got the brains to do almost whatever you want. So again, I would just underscore that you don't put all your eggs in that basket and think that it's law school or bust, or Bay Street or bust, because there's so much other things out there, and it typically has a way of working out. So don't just be kind to yourselves. I would say be kind to yourselves.
Okay, I think we can end on that note. I like that note. Kind to
Okay,
yourself as well, always.
always.
Um, so I mean, for now, those are the questions that
Okay.
I have. But yeah, everyone, thank you so much for joining. Thank you again, Matt, for joining this session. It was
My
lovely to
pleasure.
have you. And that's it. I'm gonna stop the recording right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Ah.